You're watching Let the Quran Speak. A homeless panhandler of Kansas City, Billy Ray Harris, recently returned an engagement ring to a woman who had accidentally dropped it into his cup. The woman's fiancé was so impressed with his honesty that he set up a website to receive donations for the man. Honesty seems to be a rare quality these days. How do we cultivate honesty amongst our family and friends and in our larger societal circles? Now, Brother Shabir, you pointed out this story and you wanted to talk about it because it touched you. Tell me why it inspired you.
Well, there are at least three things that really moved me about this story. One is the honesty of this panhandler. And his willingness to return the ring,
Mm-hmm.
and you already touched upon the honesty. The second is that we shouldn't look down on people. Like you see a panhandler and you might have a negative impression about them before, at first glance.
Mm-hmm.
But you never know who is the person that you're dealing with and what are the circumstances that brought this person to this situation. Here we have a person of great character, but he happens to be in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
The third thing is the followed from this, in that the girl's fiancé was so impressed with this man's honesty that he set up this website, and then people began donated. Some 6,000 people. 6,000 persons donated a total of about $145,000 at last count for this man.
Numbers are still ringing up. So.
Yes. So in a way, it shows, like people say, crime pays, but here it shows that honesty pays. And that gets me to reflect on a verse of the Quran which speaks about God providing from whence people had no expectation. But of course, for a person being honest, it's not for any material reward. It's just for the pleasure of God, and that came out too in the comments made by this individual.
I'm sure at the time that he returned the ring, he probably had no idea that he was going to get all this money and money back from the couple.
Of course, he probably had no idea. Billy Ray Harris said he looked at the ring and he knew it was something valuable. But he had a somewhat religious upbringing because his grandfather was a reverend, and some of that rubbed off on him. And so it is just out of his sheer honesty that he admitted that he had received the ring, and he was just willing to give it back.
And he was someone who could have benefited significantly from keeping the ring.
That's
because
right.
He needed the money.
True. Of course, I don't want to miss in this story the importance of recognizing also the generosity of the couple that is involved in this, both the lady and her fiancé, because she began to reward Billy Ray Harris right on the spot by offering him the money that she had on hand, and later on, her fiancé set up this website. And then, of course, the people who began to contribute like this, being moved by this story, shows that there's a lot of goodness in our societies, that people are able to respond positively to a call of this sort.
At the same time, the individual, Sarah Darling, who had lost her ring, said it seemed like a miracle. She didn't expect the ring to come back to her. Why does honesty seem to be such a rare commodity these days? Yeah,
that's a puzzling feature of our modern society, that we have come to accept as a norm that people will not be honest. We don't expect people to be honest anymore.
If we lose something, we never expect that we'll be able to find it again.
Exactly. It's like finders keepers.
Exactly.
That seem to be like the rule that goes around. And yet our great religions teach us the honesty is a basic governing principle. The Quran stresses this again and again. God says that kunu ma'a sadiqin, be with those who are sincere, be with the truthful people. The Quran stresses amana, or trust. If something is left in your care, this is a trust that you must deliver up to the rightful owners. Pilfering, stealing, cheating, dishonesty of all sorts are discouraged, even ruled impermissible in the Quran and in the life example of our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So we must bemoan the fact that these principles, which are so basic to all of the world's great religions, are so much neglected in our modern times, to the extent that people no longer expect anyone to be honest.
What do you think is the societal impact of dishonesty? And I guess all of the additional things like cheating, corruption, all those things.
Well, it's had much impact that needs to be studied more fully as as people study the problems of gambling addiction and drug addiction and so on, and they look at the fallout to society. I think the problem of dishonesty is larger than all of this and needs to be studied in its own right. You think about shoplifting, for example. Because some people are shoplifting, the prices of products go up across the board. Other people have to pay a higher amount for the same product because the merchandisers have to cover their loss that is due to shoplifting. And not only the loss from the fact that some goods have been stolen, but also the setting up of security cameras or mirrors, all of the tighter controls that are there. All of this has now, all of the policing, to put it in short, whether in a store or in a mall or in society more generally, more policing often is a response to dishonesty and to stealing and crime. So if people would just simply be more honest, then we would need less policing. And we would all feel freer, we would enjoy life much more, because of this reduction in the policing around us.
Now, this individual, Billy Ray Harris, the homeless man, said that religion was very important to him. His grandfather was a reverend. Do you think religion has some role to play in helping us to inculcate honesty?
Yes, definitely. Immanuel Kant spoke about the categorical imperative, the saying that I ought to do something. If we have God in mind, then the categorical imperative kicks in. We ought to do what is right because we are creatures of God. He created us to do what is right. And by doing what is right, we're just fulfilling the purpose of our being created. So there's no second thoughts about it. I just have to do what is right. If we don't have God in the picture, then it is difficult to see where the categorical imperative will come from. It will have no basis. People might do things if they feel that this is right and they want to do what is right, but if they don't feel that this is right, or they feel it is right but they don't want to do what is right, then there is no way in which we can say to this person, well, you ought to. The ought to only comes in when we have God in the picture, who created us and gave us this sense to distinguish between right and wrong, and now we are committed to God and we want to please Him by fulfilling the purpose for which He created us.
Do you also think that there are some religious practices, for example, that perhaps instill in us this sense of honesty? I can think perhaps of fasting, but maybe there are other examples.
True, the fasting does that. In fact, all of the all of the religious practices in general, even praying. In fact, the Quran says, "Inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar." Certainly, the prayer prevents people from evil and corrupt deeds. So the idea being that when a person stands in prayer before God, then a mindset is created that then makes it difficult for the person later on to turn to evils and to crime and to dishonesty more generally. But I would say it's not so much the practices themselves, but more so the religious attitude. One of the dominating factors of in the religious attitude of religious people is the feeling of humility, and certainly that feeling manifests itself in all of one's actions, including the idea that if somebody's property is not mine, well, that's tautology. Of course, somebody's property is not mine. But if a piece of property is not mine, then I have no right to it. I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to leave it alone. Maybe somebody dropped this thing and they'll come back for it. If I'm afraid that somebody will take it and use it without giving it back to the rightful owner, then now I will try to pick it up myself and make an announcement about it so that the rightful owner comes back and gets it. So that is treated then as a sacred trust that is somebody else's property to which I have no right, and therefore I will try my best to return it to the rightful owner. If that's what we do, even with something found on the street, as our religion teaches us, and you know, this is mentioned in great detail in reports attributed to the Prophet, peace be upon him, as an instruction for Muslims. What do you do if you find a lost object? So if you have to return the lost object to its owner, what much more so the honesty more generally.
We know that the Prophet Muhammad was a very honest man, and all of society knew him to be that way, even, you know, despite the fact that perhaps they might not have agreed with his message, the monotheistic message. How do we as religious individuals help to cultivate honesty within society as a whole?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I want to elaborate on that point, because you mentioned the fact of the Prophet Muhammad's honesty as a fact, and maybe not all of our viewers would know that to be a fact, and they need some explanation. Why do we say this is a fact? What is brought out in the biographies of the Prophet, peace be upon him, is that he was known among his people to be as Amin and Al-Sadiq, which are two names in Arabic, both indicating that the person is trustworthy and he is honest and sincere. Secondly, it is noted in the biographies that even though the non-Muslims at the time did not like the message of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to the extent that they even plotted to kill him, so that during the night he secretly migrated to escape this danger. He left the city. But the biographies note that at this time, and up till this time, after many years through which these non-Muslims were persecuting the Muslim believers, trying to get them to stop believing in this faith, and persecuting the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, on top of all of that, there were people in the city who had deposited their belongings with the Prophet, peace be upon him, because there was no central bank. So people deposited their materials with him, and he
as
kept
a trusted individual.
Yes, so he was entrusted with all of this, and the biographies note that when he migrated in the middle of the night, he left Ali to redistribute these materials to their rightful owners. So these elements in the biography of the Prophet, peace be upon him, show that he was honest. Now your question still remains, how do we cultivate that honesty? Well, the answer to that could be long. We probably don't have much time. But for Muslims, one way is to follow the Prophet, peace be upon him, make him our guide, follow the Quran as a teaching from God, and by reading the Quran and by reading the life history of the Prophet, peace be upon him, one naturally gravitates towards that orientation in life. We wouldn't always be perfect, but at least we have a direction.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you for your time, Brother Shabir.
You're welcome.
We'll take a break. When we return, we will answer questions we receive from you, our viewers.